Hi, everyone. My name is Robin Runge. I use she, her pronouns, and I am fortunate enough to be the chair of the Civil Rights and Social Justice section this year. Welcome back to our chair chat. I am thrilled to have a dear friend and colleague with us today, and we're going to have a really important conversation about an upcoming Supreme Court case. In fact, she's going to let us know when it's being argued because it's gotten fast tracked, which I think is interesting. We could talk about why and how that happens. I didn't even know that could happen. Antonia Fasanelli is our guest today, and we were baby lawyers together many moons ago. And she has continued to be one of the people who inspires me the most as what you can do with a law degree to change the world. And so I'm thrilled to continue to be able to work with her, learn from her, and she's a member of the Civil Rights and Social Justice Sections Council, and I really appreciate her volunteering her time with her busy schedule. So I want us to get to the meat of the matter and really deepen our understanding of the criminalization of homelessness in the United States and kind of our struggles in that space. So I'm going to introduce Antonia and then start that conversation so we can all learn from her. So Antonia is currently the executive director of the National Homelessness Law Center. She was previously the executive director of the Homeless Persons Representation Project, which is a Maryland-based civil legal aid organization committed to changing the systems that contribute to home poverty and homelessness. And she achieved unbelievable successes during her time there, including innovative civil legal aid projects providing legal assistance to all persons experiencing homelessness, including youth and veterans, as well as systemic initiatives to decriminalize homelessness and advance policies to end homelessness by lifting up the voices of persons most affected by homelessness. And prior to her work at HPRP, Antonia was an attorney at the Washington Legal Clinic for the Homeless, where she led the Affordable Housing Initiative, the Legal Clinic's project on affordable housing preservation and expansion. And she did amazing work representing individual tenants in that capacity. As I mentioned, she has also done an amazing amount of work as a leader in the American Bar Association. She was chair of the Commission on Homelessness and Poverty from 2011 to 2014. And as I mentioned, she is currently a member of the council, the leadership council for the Civil Rights and Social Justice section, and is co-chair of our Economic Justice Committee. And she was previously the chair of the Legal Services Committee for the ABA Commission on Veteran Legal Services. And I could just go on and brag about my friend, but know how fortunate we are to have her with us as one of the nation's experts on homelessness generally, and specifically on the criminalization of homelessness. So thank you, Antonia. I really appreciate you and the work you do for all of us.
My pleasure.
Every day.
I'm so glad to hear to be here. Thank you for inviting me. And frankly, everything lovely that you said about me, I would say about you. And it has been such a joy to get to work with you over decades now, and
Yes,
really grateful for your leadership this year of the section. So
thank you.
So thank you, Robin, and look forward to the conversation.
Yeah, and so as I alluded to in my opening remarks, there is a case that the Supreme Court recently accepted, agreed to hear, accepted cert, called Grants Pass, and this involves a really important issue that you have committed a good chunk of your career to. And so I know that it has become a priority within your community and your movement, right, to really help us understand the significance of this. And so I'd love to have you share with us a little bit more about this case and how it is and why it is so important to efforts to address the criminalization of homelessness, which is a term that maybe not everybody understands. And so we'll probably want to unpack that a little bit.
Absolutely. So I'll begin with just sharing a little bit of the origin story of this case. So Grants Pass versus Johnson is a case that grew out of very small town Oregon, a town called Grants Pass. And Grants Pass, Oregon is a town of just under 40,000 people. And it experienced tremendous population growth over the last 10 years. It in fact doubled in population size. And this doubling in population size put pressure on the housing market in Grants Pass, and the cost of housing, in particular rental housing, rose so much that over half of the residents of Grants Pass could not afford rental housing in that town. That in and of itself is something that
How uncommon is that, Antonia? Just, I mean, I hear percentages. I live in the District of Columbia, right? And I know that there's an unacceptably high percentage of the residents of DC that can't afford rent. Is that 50% just, I mean, I'm sure that getting to 50% so quickly was unusual, but I'm just curious
yes.
about, is that representative or is that much higher than other communities?
It's actually very representative of what's going on across the country. So
Yeah.
recently, Harvard released a study saying that just over half of Americans all across the country cannot afford the rent. The rent is
Okay.
too high for the income that they have, and they
Mm-hmm.
literally cannot afford housing. This is really the
Mm-hmm.
crux of the housing crisis that we are experiencing in this country. We do not have enough housing for everyone, and we do not have enough housing that is affordable for everyone.
Yeah. So that's really helpful to contextualize that, because I think someone might have heard, who's listening to this might think, oh, well, that's unusual. Grants Pass was unusual, right? And I don't want anyone to walk away with this understanding, unfortunately, even though it may have happened very over a short period of time, as you point out,
Yeah,
related to the incredible population growth. But I think I want us all to sit with that awareness of where we are, right? As you
that's
continue to tell us
exactly
about
right.
this case
Yeah,
and its significance.
and I'm so glad you emphasized it because it is really important. So, so Grants Pass experienced the consequence of its residents not being able to afford housing, which is that a good number of residents started to lose their housing through eviction or simply through leaving because they couldn't afford the rental housing.
Mm-hmm.
But what is unusual about Grants Pass is that the residents did not have a public shelter to go to. So many of us, I live in Baltimore, Robin, you live in DC, many of us
Yeah.
live in communities where there is public shelter that you can go to and stay in until you are able to obtain housing. In Grants
Mm-hmm.
Pass, they did not have public shelter. They
Wow.
had one faith-based program that required religious services and the payment of $100 in order to stay there. But for residents who had lost their jobs, had no income coming in, and that's why they lost their housing, they could not afford to stay in that shelter. And so there was no public shelter. So the residents did the only thing that they were able to do, which is either sleep in their vehicles if they had vehicles, or
Mm-hmm.
literally to sleep outside in public parks. And Grants Pass elected officials began noticing the high numbers of folks who were sleeping outside. And instead of opening a public shelter, they instead passed a local ordinance allowing them to fine people who slept outside or slept in their vehicles for literally sleeping outside with blankets and pillows. And then they
Wow. I'm
started,
sorry. I'm just having a moment because I feel like, Antonia, we read a case like this in law school 30 years ago, and I was told that that was unconstitutional. Like for a variety of reasons. What did they call that? Like situational, there's a term of art. In addition to it being I mean, that just is, I just want to like, that's mind blowing, right? That we're going to find people, they're not doing anything. They're just, they're trying to exist, right? In a community
yes,
where they can't afford, they would, many of them probably would prefer to be indoors, but that's not an option.
right,
And so so they're not harassing anyone, right? They're not being cited for, I don't know, defecation
right.
or, you know what I mean? I'm thinking about the things that people
Yeah,
think about, and
it
there's
is
no criminal
literally,
activity. This is purely for like existing in space and time outside with blankets trying to sleep. You're going to get fined.
yes, that this is really a case about everyone has to be somewhere, and
Yes.
you cannot criminalize people for not having anywhere to go.
Yeah.
And so it is really, for those of us who have practiced law for a long time, it really affects our consciousness. And we remember reading cases that said you cannot punish people for not having a choice. You cannot punish people for doing something that they absolutely had to do in
Mhm.
order to survive. And
Mhm.
that is really what this case is about. And so luckily, a number of folks in Grants Pass who were fined, and many of them have been fined thousands of dollars, were represented by the Oregon Law Center. And I really want to lift up the Oregon Law Center here and Ed Johnson, who led the legal team here, who filed this case originally in 2018. They have done extraordinary work, and it's really through their dedication that folks in Grants Pass have been represented.
Wow.
So Ed Johnson and his team represented Gloria Johnson, whose name is in the case name, John Logan, and Deborah Blake. And the three of them represented a class of unhoused people in Grants Pass who were challenging the unconstitutional application of the Grants Pass law.
Wow. So it's
And
an applied case. Okay. So it's not a facial. Yeah. Okay.
so the courts all agreed all the way through that this law and this application is unconstitutional. So
Wow.
under the Eighth Amendment's prohibition against cruel and unusual punishment. Essentially, the finding is it is absolutely cruel and unusual punishment to punish someone for literally having nowhere to go and no other option.
Wow.
They won it at the trial level and then won at the Ninth Circuit. The Ninth Circuit, for lawyers here, maybe who have followed this, is important. The Ninth Circuit had previously ruled earlier in 2018 that in the case of Martin v. Boise,
Mhm.
that arresting people who are unhoused violates the Eighth Amendment's prohibition based on cruel and unusual punishment. And so this case was building on that and saying that fines are also
Mhm. Mhm.
unconstitutional. And in this case, this horrific fact pattern emerged. Yeah.
So I'm going to ask another kind of contextual question, right? Um, are laws like the one in Grants Pass, this one is particularly about fining people, are there similar laws in other jurisdictions? It may not be the same, right? But that are intended. So, you know, as you mentioned, you live in Baltimore, I live in DC.
Mhm.
We, you know, there were homeless folks everywhere, you know, tents, beautiful, colorful tents,
Mhm.
you know, like everywhere I travel here. And you definitely hear the NIMBYs, you definitely hear, you know, we have a constant struggle in this community about how to support our folks who are homeless, but there are periodically, I think, draconian steps taken to like just pick everybody up in the night and put them somewhere against their will. And I also hear periodically, and I'm not an expert, but about similar legal efforts, right, to pass laws that are getting at the same goal of prohibiting people from sleeping on the streets. And so I'm just curious, you know, again, thinking about impact, right? Like if the
Mhm.
Supreme Court upholds this law, and we're not making any predictions, but if they did, what is the ripple effect? You know, like how
Yes.
many other jurisdictions have laws on the books, right, that are in this vein?
Yes. So, um, unfortunately, so the National Homelessness Law Center has tracked laws punishing unhoused people. We call it criminalization. It's punishment in its broadest term.
Yeah.
Has tracked these laws for 30 years. And the tragic thing is that the number of these laws has increased quite significantly since about 2017, so pre-COVID time.
Interesting.
And interestingly, homelessness has also increased quite
That's what I was
significantly.
just going to say, right? I was just
So,
going to ask you that question.
yes,
Like, is there, like, if we did a graph, right, you would see
yes,
these lines traveling together.
you would see these lines traveling together. And in fact, homelessness has increased so much in the last year. The federal government, which really does a conservative estimate of the number of unhoused people in the country, reported a 12% increase in homelessness just in the last year. So while cities and towns and states are punishing unhoused people for existing, the number of unhoused people is actually increasing. That should tell anyone that punishing unhoused people actually does nothing to reduce homelessness, and it definitely doesn't do anything to end homelessness.
And that begs the question, right, Antonia, that I would argue that's actually not the purpose of those laws. I would argue to you that, this is me, you're not saying I'm saying it, but I've always perceived those as like people in my community don't want to see that, right? This is about a different issue. And because we know that punishing people is not a way that you actually help a person. Sorry, like, it's like children, right? Like that's just kind of, like anybody who thinks that you're going to help people find housing and the supportive services that they need by fining them there's no logic in that. We know our criminal justice system is not a rehabilitatory, it's not its purpose, right? And none of those things achieve that. So I'm sorry. I mean, I'm sure you all have written large articles about this, but like I can't believe there's still a narrative out there that says, oh, we're doing this to help homeless people. Like that blows my mind.
Yeah, or we're doing it because we need to respond quickly, and
right,
that false sense of urgency leads us often on many policy issues down an ineffective path. At the National Homelessness Law Center, we believe in actual solutions, and the actual solution to homelessness is housing. And income or income supports that enable people to pay for housing. And so we, at the same time that we fiercely defend the rights of unhoused people, we also advocate for laws at the federal, state, and local levels that will expand the supply of affordable housing and expand income supports for unhoused.
Which are solutions.
Which are actual solutions to homelessness. Exactly. And the reality is that this country disinvested in affordable housing during the 1980s and dramatically cut the budget for affordable housing and has never regained that budget. So, you do that for long enough, for the decades since, and you are going to end up with the kind of mass homelessness that we have to this day. And the solution is actually to fix the problem that the government caused in the first place. The solution is actually to invest in housing for all people. I mean, the reality is nobody who experiences, living outside is incredibly hard. It is incredibly hard in Grants Pass, Oregon. That this is a cold state. In the winter, it is sub-zero temperatures. That is a hard life, and it is damaging to one's health, not to mention one's mental health. Sleeping outside is not a choice. Sleeping outside is the inevitability of not being able to have a home. And so it is, for one of the wealthiest countries in the world, it is unacceptable that we do not have enough housing for all people. And this is absolutely a solvable problem.
Yeah. And so I so appreciate you framing it that way, because I think everyone listening to this can agree with that, right? And so at this simultaneous, as you've described this simultaneous moment where we have a decrease in housing generally, and specifically affordable housing, and an increase in homelessness, to have this particular case, right, challenging a I believe, to be a horrific law that is literally punishing people for existing in space and time, is scary because, as you said, you've been tracking these laws, similar laws around the country for 30 years. Your organization has been. And so I hate to say it, but it sounds like maybe this particular manifestation of a fine or a penalty is unique, but I get the impression maybe you could give us some other examples of what other kinds of laws about that are punishing people for
Sure,
being homeless to get this, because
sure.
again, I'm thinking
Yeah,
about the impact, right? Like
yeah.
of this case, if it goes a certain way. Yeah.
And I will say that unfortunately fines are not uncommon. I think what's
Hmm.
uncommon in Grants Pass is that there's no public shelter. I mean,
Yeah.
and
But
that's
does
not.
any community have enough? I'm so sorry.
No, that's such a good point. And Robin, you and I both have roots in the Midwest and
Yeah.
in small towns in the Midwest. And yes, small towns have limited resources. They
Yes.
don't, if they have a shelter, it might be a 4 or 5 bed facility.
Hmm. Hmm.
But often those shelters are public. And so it is an
Yes.
unusual situation in Grants Pass that it was not a public shelter. And I will
Yeah.
say that in Oregon, they have used their recovery dollars, their ARPA funds, to fund the siting of, I believe it's 18 shelters in rural communities in
Mm-hmm.
Oregon
Oh,
because
wow. Okay.
of the rise in homelessness in rural
Homelessness.
communities,
Hmm.
in order to just have free and safe facilities for people to go to.
Hmm.
And so that this is an issue that is existing in many communities in Oregon and many communities across the country that often were not facing directly the challenges of more urban areas that had more unhoused people. But
Right.
truly, here's the reality. We know from the National Low Income Housing Coalition that the minimum wage does not pay for a fair market rent apartment in any county in this country.
In the whole country.
So
Yeah.
in the whole country. And so the reality is whether you have a sudden population growth like Grants Pass or not, every community is going to have unhoused people. And the time is now for us to focus on the actual solutions. The federal government has ignored this far too long
Hmm.
and
Hmm.
and and has only invested in emergency responses like emergency shelter. They now have to enact a housing supply strategy that will actually create enough housing for all people
Right.
in the country.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. No, I mean, it's a crisis. And again, to have this case coming up. And may I ask you, I mentioned in the opening remarks
Mm.
that this case was accepted, and then it's unusual for it to be accepted and heard in the same
Yes,
year,
yes,
right? Do
yes.
we have any insight into the why of that?
Only that I think Grants Pass and their council wanted it that way, but I think that the U.S. Supreme Court has not taken up a case squarely on homelessness in 40 years. Um,
Wow.
I think it's really a testament to the reality that almost every community in this country is
It's
experiencing
got a
a
crisis.
significant
Yeah.
growth in the lack of housing. And so this was the case presented to
Hmm.
them. I think we can all agree that the facts in the Grants Pass case are pretty horrific, that people literally had nowhere to go. And the application of the Eighth Amendment to that case seems pretty obvious.
Hmm.
But the reality is that homelessness is a national issue at a level that it has never been before. And it is important that each branch of the federal government address this issue.
Yeah. And what is the date of the argument, the oral
It
argument?
is April 22nd. And for anyone interested in learning more about the case, we have a website set up. It's johnsonvgrantspass.com. There is going to be a gathering on the steps of the Supreme Court starting at 8:30 the morning of April 22nd. Please come out and show your support for Gloria Johnson and for John Logan and Deborah Blake, may she rest in peace. So please come out and be a part of the movement to end homelessness.
Thank you. Thank you both for sharing the website, and we'll make sure that that, is distributed widely. And the date, I think people don't, if you don't live in DC, you don't fully appreciate how important this is, the show of support around these arguments. I think it's really impactful having been fortunate enough to be a part of those things. I know I'm going to be in the queue. Hopefully it'll be a good weather day and we're not all freezing or in the rain. That's all we can hope for. But thank you so much, Antonia, again, for the work that you do, for helping us understand this particular case and contextualizing for us its relevance in this moment. I think we're all looking forward to seeing, maybe that's not the right language. I think we're waiting to see what happens. I mean, and I know I'm hopeful for an outcome that recognizes the rights that humans have to exist in space and time. I mean, it is just literally a human right, especially as you point out. This is not, it's presented as a choice too often, and it is not. I feel like I've run from that language, and I do, as you know, gender-based violence and harassment work, and I have so many people talk to me about the choices that survivors are making, and I'm like, I just don't think we're using that word right. Like,
That's right.
Don't really think we're using that word correctly. And this is another example.
Yes.
If you are sleeping outside in those temperatures and there is nothing else available, that is not a choice, and we should not be punishing you for that. So
thank you, Robin.
You so much.
Thank you so much. And thank you to Allie for recording this. Really appreciate it. johnsonvgrantspass.com. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.